OSHA approved now. Today we're going to be working on the Tea Party Land Rover, but first, I gotta make myself a better fab table. So if you guys watched the cage video, you know that I have my affordable bender and my tube notcher here on this Harbor Freight welding table. Now this thing is pretty chintzy. I mean, it does the job, but when I was sitting here cutting away, this thing's flopping all over the place. I don't really have good storage. I picked this bad boy up off of Facebook Marketplace for 150 bucks. Nice, decent welding table. Fortunately, I had another vise that I got from Harbor Freight. And it's got a little bit of storage. You got a little shelf here and a little bit down here as well. Plus, it's on casters, and I can move my bender and stuff over to it. But what I'm gonna do today is even add a little more fabrication tooling, starting with this. If you guys have ever seen a tubing roller, you know that like Harbor Freight sells one, but it doesn't really work that good. A lot of guys end up buying the extension pieces that Swag Off-Road actually sells, or you just get it right out the gate with their Hulk roller. Gotta get these little bits of slag off of here. Got it. Now the difference between a tubing roller and a tubing bender is a bender creates your 90-degree bends, where a tubing roller creates those nice swooping radiuses. So like if I want to do a fender well, I can do a nice swooping fender well as opposed to having a bunch of little bends in it to try to make it like that. This thing's gonna make a nice radius, but we gotta set it up. Hulk hardware. Ooh, dang, that's nice. Now I've never put one of these together before, so I don't know exactly what is expected. Fortunately, everything I've gotten from Swag Off-Road comes with nice printed instructions, so it tells me exactly. An Allen wrench set, 7/16, ½ inch, 9/16, and 3/4. It's telling me that I bolt this to this, like that. This part might actually change, because the way this works is you still have a jack, you jack down your tension, and then you roll the tubing. But I went ahead and stepped up to their adapter that allows me to run the Harbor Freight Bauer, all of my dimensions as I'm working across this thing, which is pretty cool. So the first thing I do is put that little aluminum plate on there with the world's smallest Phillips head screws, screw those in. Next thing I need to do is go ahead and get my bearings on here. So these bearings just sit inside the dies, just like so. Then you slide a collar on the shaft, slide it through the bearings, and then you can put your other collar on. There we go. 5/32 Allen. And there we go. Now this thing's gonna sit centered, so I wanna make sure I get that right the first time. All right, and they set up just like that. So it has a little bolt and washer that holds on this side. There's a little ridge here. And then that way, this thing slides in. The reason 1.5 inch, so I have 1.5 inch dies as well. My rear steer Samurai buggy is all 1.5 inch tubes, so if I wanted to build a radius for it or something like that, that's exactly what I want to use. I also got their flat stock roller as well, and you have different radiuses here that you can do, or a tighter radius as you go. Now that we have both the rollers on both sides together, I need to put the upper one in that has a key stock in it. So this has a key notch in it, this has a key stock for it. We just got to set it in there. Now one thing I forgot to mention with this key stock is you want to be able to get this, it doesn't ever seize in there. Then I'm going to go ahead and do the same in here, just as a good cover your butt situation. That should keep that thing from ever giving me any grief. Okay, so I tapped it back in. Now we have our piece, and now normally this is where your handle would go, and this is how I don't have to do that. I'll be able to do it with just a push of a button. Right there, like that. And then we just got to mount this to where this Allen is. These here comes with 2 spare batteries, so we'll put those here as well. Here is the crank. If you actually planned on cranking it by hand, that's how that works. But I'm just going to go ahead and put that at the bottom of here. This gives us our angle as it comes up and down. And then I just zip tied the line up here, applied hardware, and then just tapped a couple little bolt holes in here that are what I'm doing. Swag also sells these little covers, makes things a little nicer, and we have our, and then I might even make a little mount for it or something right here that just holds it.
So I have the pipe threader that we got at Harbor Freight today. And so it comes with this guy. It's really big and heavy. And then you have this, and you have to use this guy first. So this goes right here. So that's what I'm gonna do first. And then you thread the nut back on, nice and tight. And then you have this guy, and this right here part goes on the inside. Right here is where that bolt this big rod goes through right there.
Go ahead.
It's heavy.
It locks it in.
There you go. Ta-da!
All right, so I gave it a quick test. This is in neutral right now. This is forward. Reverse is the other way. And it works. That's simple. For some reason I had a 90 in here. I can unbolt these items. And look at this hole. Right inside perfectly. So that's just it's gonna be a good deal. All right, now I chose this spot for my notcher mostly because I needed to be able to have my foot here for pressure, and that way I can run this notcher along with, if I need to ever do any angles, I can still sweep this in. But if I get any farther this way, I'm going to get in the way of my tubing roller. As my tube rolls up, it might catch the edge of this. So I got a nice 8-inch gap here between the tubing roller and the end of this. That way we can make everything work. So one of the other things I got from Swag, I actually put on my welding table that is turned into a clutter desk, but that is this. And this just basically can hold all of my grinders, all my stuff, and it even has a slot for one of these. Usually I can pull these off by hand, but it seems like the 7-inch ones always lock on. That can hang right there. And then these are actually designed to hold different weld tips. So I can put my welding gun in there. While I'm welding, I can just set it right here, and then it won't pull the trigger or nothing. We now have our fabrication table together. I need to get this welding table cleaned off. Let's bring the Land Rover back in here, start working on it. So now that we have our official fab table, brought the Land Rover back in, the old tea party, we need to start running some tubing. If you guys remember, what I showed you here was everything external DOM. This is the important part. Now, I had a few people give me grief about that. The reality is, if DOM didn't hold up better to rollovers and hits, then why does every race company, every race system require you to have DOM cages? So, with this part being DOM, the internal parts I can do with the A-True, the heat-rolled electric welded. So we're gonna do A-True for down here, we're gonna do a windshield bar, we're gonna do some more supports in here, and then everything in here to gusset this up and give it the strength that it needs. Right now, it has structure, but it doesn't have strength. If you were to take a hit real hard right here, this is going to try to collapse in because there's no support here. Same with up there because there's no support there. Same with out here because there's no support coming back down here. So this is where we need to do all of our fine-tune work. We're going to start right here. It did rain. A little bit of surface rust there. No big deal. Where I want to start with some of my structure is right here at the windshield bar. I want to get a windshield bar in. Now I can't go straight because I have this hump in my way and I don't want it to be way up here in my way. So what we're going to do is come out and around. But I think this is actually the perfect time to use the tubing roller as opposed to the tubing bender. Bam. So let's get that started. Which, to do, I'm gonna need probably 6 foot of tubing because it's gonna roll out and around. So let's cut up our 6-footer. Now when it comes to using A-True tubing versus DOM, you really don't have to worry about where you're bending it, where you're welding it, anything like that. Where this, you kind of do. So you can see the exterior seam here, and you can feel it right in there. There's a little hump right there. Now, when you bend any tubing that is electric welded that has a seam, you want to make sure that your seam is not on the outside of your tubing. Now, you can be here, you can be here, or you can be straight in the inside. But what I don't like to do is have it on the outside of the bend. Once it reaches the outside of the bend, what can happen, and I've seen this happen, is it will actually split on the outside. And I think a lot of that might be due to like bad welds, or your bend is a little bit steep, like you have a tighter radius than the 7-inch radius that we get from that bender, or something along those lines. But I've seen them hit rocks too, and then they split. So what I like to do is have the H-Roo stuff, all my bends, I like to have that seam on the inside of the bend, and that's why. This is gonna be a first time for me, so I've always wanted a tubing roller. I've never had a tubing roller, so this makes me a little bit giddy and excited all at the same time. The other nice thing about doing this with the seam up is now you have kind of a straight line to follow if this tube starts to roll on you. So if it starts to roll as you're rolling the tubing could twist, and then you end up with a curved bend, which is what we don't want, where I can monitor that with that seam right on the top. Odds of it happening with this tool are almost slim to none versus using like a cheaper version or ones that have a much tighter radius on them. Those seem to like to twist a lot quicker. There we go, nice and tight. Next thing I can do, zero that out. There we go. Now we know I'm at a 0 radius where I start. Now, just like the bender, you want to use some penetrating oil here on these tubing dies to make sure that everything holds up good. On this upper die, Swag actually says that you need to use grease. I've never used grease before, but they're saying that they want you to use grease up there to help keep that die together. All right, now we have everything set up. We're gonna do maybe 2 pushes here, and we'll see what it does. Beautiful. We're gonna turn this way. Well, I can tell you this, that's 1,000 times better than doing this to get that thing back and forth. We're just gonna keep working this until we get a nice McDonald's rainbow arch. Wipe all the gooey's off. Now what this thing did is it made a beautiful radius here, but I have about 7 inches sticking out on each side that didn't catch the radius. That's because of where the dies sit. So I could have put the dies in closer, made a tighter radius quicker, but it'd been harder on the tubing. But I think this gives me what I'm looking for, either way. All right, so now I have everything where I want it. I'm gonna go ahead and just mark where my notches need to be, right about there. And obviously I can just be a straight down notch. And I gotta do the same to the other side. All right, so I marked, don't die. So now I marked my notches, but you gotta remember that I kept my windshield bar is at a little bit of an angle. So for that tube to be flat, it's not gonna be a straight notch. It's gonna be at like 25 degrees. So I'm gonna go ahead and just turn this to that 25 degrees so that we'll be good. And by saying I'm turning it to 25 degrees, I'm kind of just eyeballing it about there. So I went ahead real quick and trimmed off the excess just so that the hole saw only has to cut through half a tube instead of a whole tube. That makes things a little easier. And then I lined up this bend down with this bender, or with this notcher. So the bend is straight to the notch, and then we can cut it out. So you can see my tube runs right down and then is 90 degrees with this. Okay, so we got our notches in here, a little bit of taper, a little bit of turn. Now I need to go ahead and clean it up. Just like I said last time, you want to run your flap disc 90 degrees of what you're doing, and that way as you do it, you're not cutting into the tubing. We'll just get it cleaned up. Prep work makes life easier. Working this thing down. All right, so we got our notches in. We have this thing kind of just set in there. I don't even have it tacked yet, but you can see how tight it is. And then we have a nice radius. We need to come back here. I'll take a tape measure, run from here to here, there to there, make sure that that's true with itself, and then try to make sure that it looks straight here on the hood as well, so that everything kind of is symmetrical. Also, you can see now how we have a nice curved bend that matches the rig. What do you guys think about that? I think once I run a bar up the middle. So the reason for doing this is twofold. Number one, now it'll be able to take a hit here without bending in the A-pillar. Secondly, doing a radius versus doing bend out over bend back in is now I really don't have a weak point, because where if I had a bend out and a bend over, that's going to create a crush point, where if it's a radius, I really don't have a crush point because there's nothing that's just bent like at a 45 or 90 degrees. So this creates a stronger hold for this support, which is what we're doing today, getting this thing structural. All right, so we got everything measured, eyeballed. We're gonna go ahead and burn this in because I want it to be solid. I don't want this to move, because we want this to stay right where it is so that we can make our windshield bars. That sucker is Stouty McGee. That ain't going nowhere. All right, now what we did here is marked our center line, which is right here on the front of this tubing, and then I went 4 inches this way and 4 inches this way. That way I can do a windshield support. I'm gonna do it with just 1-inch tubing. It doesn't have to be a whole lot, but all I wanna do is give this a little structure on the roof. And by doing that, if I come straight down with one tube, then all the pressure comes down to the one tube. If I come out with the 2 ends and come up, I'm triangulating that pressure, separating it across the tube better. All right, so here's my 2 1-inch pieces of tubing that I'm gonna use for my windshield bars. Now when you go to notch it, I'm still going to an 1 3/4 inch tube. So I'm still gonna use my 1 3/4 inch hole saw. If I was looking for an angle for my hole saw, I'm just gonna set this out like that. That's about where it needs to be. And then I come over here and I can just set this up like this. And then I know exactly the angle I need my notches. Pretty simple. So even with smaller tube, the same principles apply. I got my 1 3/4 inch tubing. I'm gonna line this up with this, make sure it's straight, and then we can notch it out. All right, so we got the notches in, got it tacked in. Forgot to film that for you. So you can see what happened now. So now any structure that comes in the front now has to go through this radius tube, and it adds more rigidity and strength to a roof crush. Pretty simple, but that makes a big difference. So if you're gonna do this for safety, I would always suggest having a dash bar and some windshield bars as well. Now we are back here at the seatbelt bar slash the B-pillar support, and I need to come right up here to make sure that I have support to my ceiling, because if this thing gets hit hard right in the middle of this thing, it needs support coming down. So I marked my center line here. I already know my center line above, and I can just take this and come straight down with it. It's just a straight mark at 21.5 inches fat. So I'm just gonna go 21.5 inches, straight notch, because these are in line. It's just a straight bar to give us that strength in the center of this rig. Just like everything else I've done today, because this is an interior tube, it's not gonna see any rocks, it's not structural, it's just a support of structure to keep this thing rigidified. I am using the H-Screw tubing. I just gotta make my piece. Now I have my notches here, but you can see I can't get in here because I have tubes in the way right here. So I need to go ahead and put a notch on this side and on this side. So I'm just gonna go ahead and make my marks where those sit, and we'll be good. Now, those are still 2 straight spots. And remember what I said before on the last video that I did on this thing, is that a tight notch is a happy weld. So we wanna make sure that we get these notches nice and tight so that there isn't a bunch of slop, and so that this thing will weld up really, really nice. So I notched this side's in a different spot because if you remember the tube comes on the back. So what I have to do here is I still have to take this and get this straight. So I'm getting this notch vertical straight up and down with here before I put this notch in. And it's that simple. Now all I'm doing is putting the notch halfway through because these are in two different spots. The trick here, because I have multiple different notches, is to put this side in first and then slide the base in. That way, we don't have to cut part of our notch out up here to make this fit. Even though I have everything marked and I have it tacked, before I go ahead and burn this in, I'm gonna jump back out, give it a once over, give it a good look, and then we'll weld it in completely. Looks pretty straight to me. All right. All right, I went and grabbed my other hoodie because it's getting a little cold in here. It is winter time after all. Next tube I want to do is go straight down into here. Now what I want to do is put a plate here because this is going to spread out the weight. So if this comes down to here, for some reason if I have a hard head up there, goes through this, comes to here, it's all just extra structure, extra support, extra strength. So the easiest way to do that, cut myself a little 5x5 square plate and we'll weld it in over there. That was easy. Normally I don't like to spot weld stuff down, but because I'm going from a big thick plate to sheet metal, and because I only have 35 thousandths wire, I don't want to burn through that sheet metal. So I just burn it down, and then now it's nice and solid. We can get this plate here, and we have a good supporting structure that separates through this thing. It's gonna be a lot nicer. I can tell you this much, just with those tubes there, like this thing is even more solid than it's ever felt. Next thing I want to do here is the upper crossbars. So I want to come up here at this angle, get these to give this thing structure this way. So if you hit a rock hard here, it can't crush in this way. It has to go through all the other tubes to make that happen. I'm going to use 1.5" A-true for that because it doesn't have to be 1 3/4" in there. That is literally structural support as opposed to like a major part of this roll cage. That's just to keep it up there. Okay, so I measured out my length here. I just took, it was like 31 3/4 inches inside a tube to inside a tube. So I just cut a 33-inch piece, put my first straight notch in it. Now what I'm gonna do is just set it up here and mark where I need to notch it at. So I'll just take my pen and mark it on the other side. I'll show you here. Now the only thing I need to do here is take this and make sure that I am straight vertically coming up and down for my notch. Pretty simple stuff. And I have my mark here so you can see where my mark is. My hole saw is going through it. Not too awful hard when you have a tube notcher and a Sharpie. So we got our bars in. You can see that I separated it from here to here. Now a lot of you would be saying, why on earth would you do that? Because you really normally want it at the joint. But the reason I did that is for head clearance here. I was looking at where this tube falls, and if I were to have that one here, when I have this seat all the way back, my head is really close to this, so I wanted it back a little farther. I can just throw a gusset in, a 90-degree gusset, just add a 1 inch or something that comes from there to there. Now, race car world, you would definitely want it at that joint. Rock crawler world, it is slow flops a lot of times, or maybe a rollover, but if I need to have that gusset there, that will save me. I'm not doing 100 miles an hour and doing like 17 rolls. So in the last video I showed you how to do the roof bars. I went ahead and just made the rest of them. So now it actually looks like a Land Rover Discovery. So I have all my roof bars in up top, And then I went ahead and added in a kicker support. So this kicker bar here, your hip bar, this bar, normally I like to come down at an angle, but this goes right down to the tube that goes into the frame. So there's actually support here from these and this going down. I did that for a couple reasons. One, this is a jalopy. Two, that will protect your hips. So now everything is kind of protected there. Obviously the seat's going to be back here for me, but that should keep most of the rocks out of there. If I decide later, maybe I'll go ahead and add like an 1.5 inch tube or something up here down to it. Either way, that is good enough for now. What I've been wanting to do this whole time is show you guys my plans for the back of this thing. So I have a really neat plan for the back of it, which first involves getting rid of these, because now everything's supported. If you remember how we bolted these on, this ain't going anywhere. We can cut these little box pieces out, and then I'm gonna even reuse them. Boom. Perfect. Now, I bet at this point, a lot of you are wondering, what in the heck is going on here, Colt? Well, this is what I'm doing. This is where the spare tire is going to be. This, it can't be a Land Rover without a ladder, right? I still have this box that was for this body here to keep it together. I'm going to reuse this right now and make ladder rungs. And I think that's going to be amazing. I measured the original ladder rungs and they were 11 inches apart. I'm gonna go 10 inches apart because I got almost 40 inches from here to the floor here. So I'm just gonna do 10, 20, 30, and then this would be obviously be your top one. So I'm just gonna measure across here and get my lengths. Man, look at that. Bam. How about that? Bam, bam, bam. We got a ladder. Oh yeah, that's not light at all. There we go. That looks more about where we want it. Now I can take my measurement here, come in front of that 6.5 inches. So I'll come out here, 6.5 inches. Mark this too. Oh, yeah, that's heavy. Boy, fun. All right, now this has been something I've been wanting to try for quite a while. Don't know if you guys have ever seen one of these, but this is a radius finder. Swag Off-Road sells them, and it's gonna be very easy for me to make a nice circle. I wanna make a circle because I wanna make a plate to hold that wheel. All right, so there's different holes for different lengths. This is the 1/2 inch one, so right here is 4.5. I just set this in the hole and start cutting. How about that? A perfect circle. Now you guys might be thinking, why on earth did I just weld that circle to the back of the wheel? I'd never be able to get the wheel off. But here's why. Now I know exactly where to drill my holes. So I can drill all 4 of my holes, get my bolts in, and then get my lug nuts on. So one of the things I forgot to save was the spare tire carrier that was mounted on the back of the rear hatch. Now I gave everything from this thing to Highway 64, my local salvage yard here in Farmington. But because these holes are so big, I can't use like a 1/2 by 20 lug nut. I got tons of those. So I got to use these stock lug nuts that I still have. The problem with that is these things are massive and I don't have these bolts. So I'm going to have to get 3 of these bolts in the morning. So I will see you guys then. Because it's nighttime. New morning. It snowed last night. Let's go get some bolts. J-Lou, one of the best fastener shops in the country I've found, and they've always had every bolt I've ever needed to this point. So custom length, metric, all threaded bolts to make my wheel studs. Boom, ba da boom, ba da boom, ba da boom, ba da boom. Boom, boom. I think it's time to drill a couple holes. Metric speed wrench. Bam. Now I can weld these bolts up on the backside. Spare tire mount. Got it welded in. Added a gusset back there just to keep it from tweaking, but I think that will be more than enough. Let's get it burned in. Alrighty. All right, while I went into town, I also got the mail and I scored another license plate. So thank you, Mike Cowbell from Saskatchewan. This is gonna go up in my Canadian provinces plate because I do not have Saskatchewan. So super cool. This is actually in support of their football team. I guess they have a football team up there. It's a Rough Riders Pride. Also, I'd gotten sent this, and this is from a family in California. They made this for me. They might know that I'm a kind of a Star Wars geek, so I appreciate that. But for some reason, I lost the box that it came in, so I can't tell you who it was, but thank you anyway. I have this on the door going out the shop. This is the way. Ugh. This is the way. Ugh. Oh yeah. So you might be wondering why I used a piece of tubing to check my notch. Let me show you why. Because I still have this, even though it's all busted up. Cool factor engaged. And we still got our Widow Weta. Yikes. OSHA approved now. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this video. We made this thing look a little more like a Land Rover, plus we got our structure now so that I feel safe in a rollover. Also showed you how to notch tube at different angles, how to mark it, how to place it. Pretty simple once you know what you're doing, and to use the A-True to save you a few dollars on the interior tubing, along with how to use a tube roller as opposed to a tube bender. So I'm gonna finish up all the little stuff on this cage. The next time you see this thing, we're gonna be working on the drivetrain because we gotta get stuff tougher down lower.
Please make sure to like and subscribe.
Hopefully this cage is taller than Matt's jalopy so it'll establish dominance on the trail. Thanks for watching.